Okay, this broadcast is going to be on the meta self. Um, in this one, I'm going to present a more rigorous definition, a more mathematically consistent definition in terms of set theory of the meta self. Also, I'm introducing the meta self diagram, which is a pretty cool phenomenon I thought of. I know in one of my earlier chats with Mike Hugman, that debate I had with Mike Hugman in Tenuous Theories, I was stumbling over myself because I was talking about the relation between a meta self and the supersets that contained it. And I was having trouble when I was talking about definition. I, I was having trouble figuring out which one was a superset and which one was a subset. And that's because I was conflating instances and definitional elements. And once I figured that out, I came up with this cool relationship between what I was thinking of and what I was traditionally taught with the traditional Venn diagram. Okay, so let me start. So the meta self again, in egotism, ego-utilitarianism, the meta self is the central focus of an actor. It is what's used to calculate the value of action or the morality of action from the perspective of evolution itself, the perfect, the mechanism that uh, all action should be aligned with. And it can be evaluated from evolution's perspective, just what I said. So, and when analyzing the description, uh, or when analyzing the definition or meta self of a set in terms of set theory, you get an inverted Venn diagram. And I say inverted because it inverts the containment relationship here. It preserves the order some way, but it preserves the order but reverses it. It's a pretty cool way to look at things, and it's actually the way I want to look at things morality wise. Because when you're an actor, when you look at the traditional Venn diagram and try to use it as somewhat to divide up your interests, it kind of confuses the actor actually. And this is where I think the state of philosophy, the state of moral deontology, it's kind of confused because it's kind of using the traditional Venn diagram on the right versus my meta self Venn diagram on the left, which is just an inverse because it's actually in reference to the definitions of each set itself, and on the right it's focused on the instances of the set. So it makes sense on the right because it's instances. And it also makes sense. It's logically consistent on the left. I didn't just invert it because it represents the definitions themselves of the set and not the instances of them. Um, although this way you can actually partition each meta self set into its component sets, and I'll explain later. So let me get to the definition of my new revised definition of meta self, which Tenuous had a problem with in our debate, and he was just quibbling about the ambiguous nature of the term smaller, right? And that's very trivial. I mean, there's another ambiguous term like descriptor or descriptions, and that's still somewhat ambiguous even in this definition. But you can see I'm still making progress, and I'm building solid intuition. Anyone can look at this and say, okay, this is mathematically resolvable if I didn't do it here already. And I know there's still some room for criticism in the term descriptor. But let me go ahead and talk about it. So a descriptor, right, is a definitional element of a superset that contains the object as an instance, right? So any object or meta self under consideration, so when we consider a meta self, or that's another term for an object, or actually, I think I'm referring to its definition itself. It's each descriptor, right, represents a component metaself or a superset. Each component metaself is a superset that also contains the object, right? So again, if we take a look at the traditional Venn diagram here, We know Adam, if let's say our meta self under consideration is a person called Adam, and let's just say he's Jewish, he's human, he's mammal, but it's kind of redundant, right? If I say he's Jewish, I think it incorporates all of these supersets already, because but the instances of them are incorporated in the reverse order, right? So, but if you look here, you can see Adam. The definition of Adam incorporates the definition of human, and the definition of human incorporates the definition of Jewish. Oh, no, no, no. Actually, it doesn't. It incorporates the. Did I write that right? Yeah, incorporates the definition of Jewish, meaning all Jewish are human, and all humans. No. Did I do that right? I don't know. It's probably right. But anyways, yeah, so each superset represents each element of a definition, right? Represents a superset, or what I call a sub-meta self. And so again, it reverses the order, right? So a superset becomes a subset when you analyze by definition instead of by instances. And so here, so consider a meta self or a conceptual set or definition that refers to an object in reality. So consider a meta self A, right? That namely A, that refers to an object. Let's call it A. Then the meta self of A is such that A. Oh, so this is the definition of meta self. Sorry, I didn't see it. So then the meta self of A is such that A, a set that so that A contains all the descriptors that describe the object. And if A is an element, if A is an element of A, then A is a descriptor. So again, I in my first formulation of meta self, I said it's the smallest set that contains all descriptors. And he Tenuous had a problem with my my term smaller because it was somewhat, there's no mathematical equivalent for it. Especially when you consider infinity, it's kind of weird how you apply it. But using this thing, it's like a set that contains all descriptors and nothing else. That's essentially what it is intuitively. But this is the test this is the mathematical test you can verify with. And if A is an element, so you take any element of A, then it must be a descriptor. And that's how you know it's a meta self. You analyze all the elements. If they all describe the object under analysis, that's the meta self of that object. Okay, so it's mathematically consistent here. The only thing ambiguous here is maybe descriptor, and I had to kind of like just think this up the last an hour ago. So if there's any room for criticism, it's going to be in the term descriptor. This is I believe is already set theory consistent. Okay, so what so egotism and the morality of egotism is concerned with the weighted moral self, right? So I'm not sure if I want to incorporate this into the definition of meta self itself, or if I want to incorporate this into the relative value function for a meta self, right? So because I think in the end, in order to distinguish my philosophy from anything else, I'm going to incorporate into the meta self. So what you see here, so the weighted moral self is a proportional weighting distribution between a partition of a meta self under consideration into mutually exclusive spanning set of component meta selves, supersets, or descriptors, as I said earlier. Egotism says the weighting should be proportional to how useful the component is in perpetuating instances of the meta selves under consideration. Again, perpetuating the instances of one's meta self is, again, the primary objective. The one true principle egotism says that's the easiest, that's one of, I believe this is the only objective that evolution's selecting for. And this is not a rigorous definition yet. So yeah, it's open for mathematical criticism, but at least right here, I've made progress on my meta self. Okay, so the so if you look at the meta self diagram here, I could have, but I didn't have the tools, and I don't know how to work MS Paint well. But if you look here, like when it contains a superset, right? Because its definition is already inherited into the super meta self, or the meta self under consideration, the sub meta self. All its definition is incorporated into the super meta self, or the meta self under consideration. All definition of any sub meta self is incorporated into the meta self under consideration. But the thing is about there's a proportion should be applied to each and everything. So you can draw this Venn diagram proportionally correct by, like, let's say if mammal was kind of like half the importance to the actor atom, as far as how much it's essential into the existence of Adam himself. In other words, it's kind of like if you picture a meta self like a society, right? Of people, and each person who is the weight of each person is going to be determined by their productivity in society. If it's pure like an economic analysis, just GDP, right? So the existence of this economic meta self society is dependent upon production in this case. So the weighting should be proportional to it. So I claim in a free market, it'll look something like I claim a free market will actually be a type of democracy. So ego-utilitarianism, while it's anarchist, is also saying that a free market anarchy is democratic in nature. Only the proportion is going to be based on how productive you are, and you must participate in the market. You must participate in the market. Once that is established, your value in society, how much weight you have in society, or how much weight you have to the meta self of society, is dependent upon your production. In total, it's if you want to get more general as far as regular morality, not just merely like economic or financial. We can talk about that person's value to the existence of society, right? The definition of society itself. How important is this component meta self, this individual citizen? How important is that citizen? How critical is that guy to the existence of the definition of that society? And you have to look at the definition of society and see, okay, if you take out this guy, does this definition cease to have instances? And that's the weighting. That's the free market way. Essentially, it's kind of like they say, you heard the saying, voting with your dollars. And that's kind of like, this is kind of like the moral equivalent. And I claim that's always the case. Any meta self you can think of, it doesn't be even a society, it can be even a human body, right? So when you just think about, or let's just think about the mere physical existence of the human body, and it's actually the alive human body, right? So you need, what are the most primary things you can't live without, right? You can't live without, first you think of the brain, right? And it must run all the autonomic and the nervous system, and from the nervous system that runs your circulatory system and everything. So the brain and the heart, I mean, should have a bigger weighting to your concern. That's why nature checks those two things a larger degree than any of our, maybe, let's say, appendages. So you can live without a finger. So when you look at the component meta self, like of the body of a finger, the value of a finger, it's not that important, right? So again, it makes sense, right? If someone's gonna like swing a sword at you, what's the first thing you're gonna do? You're gonna protect your head with your arm. You're willing to lose your arm before your head, because your head has more value to the meta self of the body. It's the same thing with any other meta self, I say, whether it be an idea, whether it be especially in economics, a society, a market, right? Value in this democracy should be, everything's a democracy. Any meta self is a democracy, and all the components are fighting for their own existence. This is what I claim. So it's a type of game, not only for this meta self under consideration, but inside there's a war happening. I don't want to say a war because obviously it's going to be somewhat mostly symbiotic, but then there's going to be a war between like the actual I don't know how you would say it. Like let's say you have let's just say in the realm of ideas that a person adopts. There's wars going on, right? You're trying to figure out what's true and what's not. You adopt a belief temporarily until you can find a suitable replacement. And this is what I claim that's going on in society, right? It's always trying to improve upon itself. But each component meta self is trying also to do the same thing. And when it comes down to it, when a component meta self or a meta self that's a part of a larger super meta self, when it's faced with the dilemma of a seemingly the same conflicting goals, primary objectives, like let's say it has to choose between two actions, one that serves the component meta self and one that serves the greater meta self, right? So this is where ego-utilitarianism comes in, right? It's somewhere in the middle, right? So you can see from the Venn diagram here that this is the concern of Adam right here. If you look at just this Adam. Oh, also, I didn't mention that. I'll get to this later. It's just a trivial thing, but let's just look at the meta self of Adam here. You can see, like, it's proportionally correct. It's concern for like mammals and human, but the problem is they're not mutually exclusive, so there's going to be double counting here. So when I say his concern for mammals, that includes all his concern for humans, and that also includes all the concerns for the Jewish humans, right? So in this case, they're mutually inclusive. So when I talk about his total care for mammals, it includes the total care he has for humans, and it also includes the total care he has for Jewish. So you want to be careful here. That's why I always say you have to partition your set into mutually exclusive things when you do the value calculation, so you don't double count, and you can actually see the optimum care. And the thing about it is, the weird thing about definition is you can almost infinitely decompose any meta self or component meta self into smaller and smaller meta selves. So your analysis, the accuracy and precision of your analysis, the accuracy of your analysis is only dependent upon your ability to do so. Like, you're going to have budget constraints of time and resources. And you don't want to, I mean, so if you're talking about just a society, you could be, even a large one, let's say in the Earth, the entire population of Earth, you can decompose just the human component of that into all humans separately, each one having their own name and description that distinguishes one person from the other. And then if your only concern was for people, let's say you weren't concerned about the environment or ideas, you give weighting to each person, and that would determine how you should optimally act, at least from evolution's perspective. There's also what I call the subjective meta-self, right, or the empirical subjective meta-self, where what you think how you should distribute, or how you'd actually act. And there are empirical tests to see what you think the meta-self should be, or the evolutionary, or at least your personal morality. All morality, what I've done here is I've constructed egotism's definition set so that it's really neutral, right? So Tenuous is kind of attacking me for my definition set because he thought like it has an ulterior motive to set out to I constructed it so that I can prove what I want to prove, but it's not. It's actually just the foundation is very neutral. You can describe any morality in terms of this, whether it be utilitarianism, which is poorly defined, egotism with no you, like purely narcissism. You can define that as like what would he put weighting on? But just himself. But you can see that if you're considering humans, that's everybody. I mean, and again, you can't. That's why I'm getting confused. I'm not used to analyzing in terms of the meta self diagram, because I'm thinking all humans are in here, right? And it's actually not, right? So I'm thinking this, right? So we're humans. Obviously, Adam's a subset. Martha's a subset. Julie's a subset. I'm thinking that it's the same here, but it's not. It's gonna be something like this. Julie's here, right? And it's gonna be like Max is here, Ace is here, or something. Yeah, I'm just totally unaccustomed to looking at that or analyzing that. I'm tripping over myself logically just because I'm not used to it. But the logical implications or the moral implications of the meta self diagram, I think, is very useful. It puts it into perspective pictorially and intuitively. So I think it's a pretty cool thing I've come up with or figured out, right? So again, I believe that if this has any significance, it seems really elementary, but the thing is, I mean, it's somewhat original, so it's really hard to come up with, even though it's just elementary sets, right? The relationship between definition and the instances of a set. So you take a look at a set. On the left, when you analyze it definitionally, you get my meta self diagram. When you analyze it by instances, you get the traditional Venn diagram or conventional Venn diagram. So and another, I'm going to end it here. I don't want it to go too long, but I also was thinking, where does the null set play? Because obviously the null set in mathematics is a subset of any set, right? So then obviously just from that you think it's a superset of all sets, right? The thing is, I was conflating instances again, right? I'm thinking it has no instances. How can it be like a super meta self, the ultimate super meta self? And the thing is, I wasn't looking at the definition, and it's weird, right? So you're thinking null, so you're thinking no definition, right? But it's actually counterintuitive. It should be all descriptors in the null set, and not just. I mean, you can. It doesn't have to be all, but all guarantees it to be a contradiction, right? Obviously, because there's obviously all terms and their complements are in that set, therefore guaranteeing it. But all you have to do is have one set of complements and you have a contradiction. But to guarantee it, I mean, all descriptors would guarantee null set. So I was just playing around with that idea when I first did this today. So I'm going to think about that a little further. If anyone can think of the relationship or what the null set actually looks like, or is there a minimum null set, like just two complements? I know that's a small, quote unquote, smaller null set. Smaller in the terms of, it has less descriptors. I mean, again, anyways, I'm just going to end it here. I thought it was pretty cool. Now you can see like what I'm going to get to when I get to my relative theory of value function, right? Or what evolution imposes upon the actor as far as the optimum strategy. This is how you value strategy. The costs and benefits in relation, the evolutionary costs and benefits, or the existence costs and benefits to each and every component meta-self. And so you can see here that egotism must necessarily consider every human. I mean, you consider every human, actually, I think. Or do you? Actually, no. Actually, I think. Actually, no. Actually, you're going to consider the universe, which the universal set will be. I have to think about this more, but to see if it's useful. But I'm tripping on myself because I'm using instances, and it's hard to think in terms of definition itself. But it's an interesting. I hope I've made some headway into developing my philosophy Um, I'd appreciate if anyone knows any set theory, if I'm going anywhere with this, if they can see some flawed logical conclusions or mathematical inconsistencies that I might have come up with. And feel free to correct me down in the comments below or commend me. Uh, okay, thanks for watching.